of the world, the autodidactic. Just because self-education is your modality, it doesn't mean you can't find other ways to experience the higher education system that we have grown to know. This is your post to be your guide for higher education from the viewpoint of the autodidactic self-learners. Now, I am Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. My mission is to innovate in many fields over the course of my life, and my ambition is to help multidisciplinary people. And I find that a lot of autodidactic people are also at the same time multidisciplinary as well. And so whether you're listening on the POLYCASTS or watching on PolyInnovator, you have come to the right place for success. Now, higher education is a great way to go about that push for learning, that push for knowledge. And in this video, this OmniContent, I'm going to explain that. So the OmniContent is the series I do where it has content repurposing in mind, which means that I make a blog post, I turn that into a video, and then I make that into a podcast. And then from there, I can chop it up any way I want. And I just thought I'd explain that because it's been a minute since I have done one of these, and I wanted to let you know that there is a blog post accompanying this video. And if you're listening in, you can go watch the video or look at the blog post, because the blog post and the video are made separately. The podcast is literally just cut from the video, but I try to phrase it in a way to make it easier. So if you're listening in, you can't see my hand gestures coming forward, but at least I can exemplify what I'm trying to say. Now, there are a lot of ways to gain credits for college. And so whether you are self-learning in an isolated place where there's no credits, there's no actual way of progressing into a more traditional role, or of learning, then there are systems you can actually learn from and do in order to take what you've learned on your own and apply it to a more traditional learning environment. And so there's CLEP-Test or MicroMasters. In fact, I was thinking about this literally earlier today as I was walking home. I have looked into MicroMasters for ages, since they basically came out. And there was one in particular by MIT that really caught my eye, Data, Economics, and Development Policy. But the problem was you need to know statistics and data science for it, particularly R programming, I think, where I'm a little bit more comfortable with Python. And I definitely didn't know any statistics, so I wasn't able to pursue that one. But there was another one kind of horizontal to it that's about global supply chain management. And that one in particular, I felt that would take a polymathic mind to really organize those systems well. And I thought that would be a good role for me if I were to go down a traditional path. That would probably be the most traditional way of me, for myself, going about it. 'Cause I don't think I'd want to go get a bachelor's degree than a master's degree. I'd rather just get the MicroMasters and go straight into the master's. And so that is one pathway where I can take my self-education. I can learn the little micro skills that I need to know for supply chain management, such as like a lot of time it's soft skills and business acumen. But for the most part, like the other one, you needed to know statistics. And so that's something I can learn on my own, then take it into that MicroMasters, then take it into a degree. And that's the pathway I'm trying to exemplify today in this post. So why is higher education important? Well, regardless of what your opinion is on higher education, there is this need to have something, right? A lot of time people go to school in order to learn whatever skill they want to do in their life. And so they actually don't always know what they want to do. So they go to school without a plan, without any kind of inclination towards of where they want to go. And while that used to be a good idea, especially back in the day, if you're really like early 2000s, even before that, if you didn't know what you wanted, college was a viable way to figure that out. Now with the cost, it's actually not really that viable. You really need to test it out and learn what you want to learn what you like before putting that time, money, and effort investment into a higher education endeavor. Now, you could be going to get an associate's degree and that's it, that's fine. Or you can go all the way up to a PhD. Regardless of where you are on that scale, you still need to have that plan. And so higher education is important because it allows you to get to that point of knowledge, that deep level of knowledge in one or more areas to actually work in that field. That's why we go for higher education. That's why people go to school, is so they can get an education. Not that I have anything against liberal arts, but a lot of those liberal arts degrees, they're more for just a generalized knowledge. And while I'm normally very for generalized and polymathic learning, a lot of times these liberal arts degrees don't actually provide that job that you want. And that's one reason why you would go to higher education. I think a lot of people are choosing to go more liberal arts because there is this rise of generalists, this more self-learning, polymathic people that we have always had in our civilization. But over the past 100 years, they've really been stifled. They've been pushed down for the sake of specialists. And now we're really realizing with this new internet world that we need more generalists and more polymathic people. And so people are not wanting to choose one field. They're wanting to dabble in a lot of areas to see what they like and then go deeper in the areas that they do like. And they use the liberal arts degrees in order to do that. So that's one pathway you could take as well. And then you could take that degree and go into a more specialized master's, for example. So despite what I think about education and how whether or not I think college is worth it at all, there is some people are going to think it's worth it. And there's also degrees that you have to have a degree for, such as like medical fields and that kind of thing. So there's obviously a need for school still. I don't think that we can fully replace it just yet. But how do you go about getting that education? How do you go about getting the higher education that we need? Because you can go and get self-learning and actually probably learn more than what you would learn in school. And particularly in the case of like programming or digital marketing, what you learn on your own is going to be more valuable than what you learn in the school most of the time. It's kind of amazing how people still think that like a digital marketing degree is actually valuable, because by the time you get the knowledge from the actual source to the accreditation bureau, to the college, and then to the students, it's already outdated, if not completely incorrect at that point. Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, they change so rapidly. It will take months, actually, just like as little as months, to make those changes. Whereas it takes years for the schools to make the changes in the curriculum. So there's certain degrees where you shouldn't necessarily go to school for. And sometimes business is hit or miss, like depending on what you want the business degree to do. You may not actually choose to do an MBA in a traditional learning environment. You might choose to do a no-pay MBA or the $100 MBA or something like that. So there's two pathways I foresee people taking. And I think both pathways are completely valid, and I wanted to give you the option. So regardless of my own personal opinion, I always believe in giving people options. And if one pathway is not working, then you can pivot to the other one. And by having that choice, that's what I care way more about than trying to spread my own opinion or something like that. So the two choices are take your self-learning into college, or take your self-learning and just double down on that, forego college altogether. So let's start off with the first one there, is that when you take your self-learning, like I said earlier, you can establish what you like. You can figure out what particular subjects interest me most and what can I learn and what do I enjoy learning. And so sometimes people will think, oh, I can't learn math, or I can't learn those hard sciences. And then they go pursue it and they realize what they can actually do. They realize their potential for learning and their actual potential as a human being as well. And sometimes they find that out through school, but you're only going to take those courses, unless they're like gen eds level, but you're only going to take those courses if you're actually taking that degree. But if you actually are interested in that subject, you can learn on your own. You can sit there and learn astrophysics online. I've spent a lot of time doing that myself. I'm not an astrophysicist by any means, but I know way more than the layperson. And that's something I was able to establish in my own personal identity because I spent so much time learning about the different planetary bodies and how they move and the chemistry behind it, astrobiology as well. And so it's interesting how by me taking the time to watch those videos, learn from the blogs, read the PhD dissertations, those kind of things, by doing that, now if I wanted to go get a PhD down the line, if I obviously got the degrees beforehand, I could go into that because I know that I like it. And like I would actually have a reason to do it and reason to try to go towards that. And I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but my point is I have the knowledge now that I enjoy that field. So by being a self-learner, you can establish where you're at. You can give yourself more of a baseline, and you can actually see, kind of like working out for the first time, you have that capacity. It's not some ethereal thing anymore. Not only that, you can actually take some of your self-learning and take it into CLEP tests or other methodologies of gaining credits like micro-credentials and MicroMasters, or even micro-bachelors now too. You can take your self-learning and actually apply it toward a degree and have it count towards that degree. And so self-learning is a very powerful method for this. And I always encourage a lot of young people, especially around 18, to not go to college yet and take your time to learn or get a gap year and go travel, go work, go do stuff first so you can know what you like. Otherwise, you're just wasting time and money getting a degree that you don't want. Now, the other thing about self-learning is that when you're in college, you're already self-learning anyways. A lot of the learning is on your own or in study groups. You're sitting there reading from a textbook and taking notes. Like you're literally just taking down that information and writing it back down. That type of learning is not always very effective. And not only that, it can actually, you can lose it pretty easily as well. So unless you're keeping it up, and unless you keep learning after that course has ended, if you try to measure it out over time after your course is ended, then you might keep it. Otherwise, you'll learn it and you'll retain it for a short time, then you lose it. By doing self-learning instead, you can actually create a system to actually go around that course before and after, and you can interleave it with the other stuff you're learning as well. Now, the other option is to forego education altogether in the more formal sense. This is actually what I ended up doing, and while it's certainly at this point, up until this point in my life, I may go into MicroMasters and pursue that into the degree, but what I decided to do at my young age was to pursue my own do-it-yourself education. I made my own DIY degree, and since that's kind of coined by someone else, I transform it into a modular degree. And I actually like this name a little bit better because it's modular. You have a more choose what you do next approach kind of thing. And that do-it-yourself kind of approach, I think, is what's really key. Now, if you keep this DIY mentality, you might almost think it's not as good. Like if you do a DIY project, the thing that you build is not necessarily going to be as good as what you would buy in the store. The reason why people sell stuff in the store is that it's manufactured to a certain degree. It's made sure that it has less flaws than what other people would make and that kind of thing. That's why we manufacture things at scale, because then you can fix any little details. When you make something yourself, there's obviously going to be a lot more leaks in the faucet, if you will. But you can also fix it more easily too. When it's manufactured somewhere else and you can't necessarily understand how they go about it, then you lack the ability to change it. So think of it like computers. If you take the DIY approach and build your own computer like I did here, right? I know what parts are on my computer. I know that if the GPU is not working, I know exactly what to do, what to replace, and that kind of thing. At one point, I put a different GPU in there. It's actually right over here. And I realized that I didn't have a power supply big enough to handle that GPU and the rest of my components in there. And so I needed to take that out, switch the power supply out, and get that all fixed. Obviously, I haven't gotten to that point yet, but that's what I would do. And that's because I took a DIY approach and I have a computer. Whereas if you have a Mac, you can't change anything in a Mac. In fact, they actually go against you quite a bit and prevent you from repairing your own device. And you can, sometimes they're soldered to the motherboard and there's no way to actually repair it at all. They want you to replace the entire motherboard, which the cost of repair could almost be more than the actual device itself. You might as well just go buy a new device instead of trying to repair it. And so that's the difference there between building your own and just getting a prepackaged one. And that's how a degree is as well. A lot of people don't see degrees in that manner. And that's why I wanted to make this post today, because you're taking a prepackaged system and you're trying to add your own little things to it and it doesn't work. And like I said earlier in the video, in the podcast too, that a lot of people are taking these liberal arts degrees and trying to get these interdisciplinary studies because they're trying to have control over what they're learning. They're trying to choose what electives they go for. They're trying to choose what kind of degree path they go towards. And that is the only way in that traditional system that you can actually go about doing that. There's no choice otherwise. And even then, the electives are usually have to be related to your major, and you can't even explore too often beyond that. That's not always the case, but it is most of the time. And so that's why we're seeing just a large rise in that, because people want choice. People want the capacity to choose what they are learning and not spending money on courses they don't care about. Sure, yes, like having chemistry and math is going to help you. But beyond that, some of the other courses they require you to take are not going to actually suit you in real life, let alone in academia as well in some cases. So that's why I often say to have the choice to pursue your own do-it-yourself learning. Now, I talked about a lot of these in the actual blog post itself, and so I'm not going to spend too much time on each of these because you can just go read the post and see what I say on there and get the links there. But these are a few different endeavors that people have done in order to pursue their own education. Now, one thing in particular you'll see a lot in common is that there are 3 areas where a lot of people have pursued their knowledge and pursued their own degree path. And there's a lot of overlap between a lot of them because they're all areas that are very common for people to take degrees in, such as MBAs, or in this case, computer science, or even philosophy. Those are 3 fields where there's a lot of need and want for a degree. And some people take philosophy degrees purely in order to expand their mind, right? People do computer science degrees in order to get a job in that related like technology fields. And then there's MBAs as well in order to pursue business. And so there's actually a few different options here. We have the no pay MBA. MBS is like, not MBS. Tim Ferriss is real world MBA, and then the polymath MBA. These are 3 completely different approaches, but they're all unique and interesting in their own right. I think Tim Ferriss took a really, like, obviously real world approach to his learning. And I think it's a little extreme in the real world thing. Like there's not as much courses as if there is more like things that he's doing, like going to investors and learning from them directly. The polymath MBA is actually more along the lines of the modular degree system, where it takes a more skill tree based approach and trying to interleave many different knowledge areas. We have Lori Miller's BA in 4 weeks, and now this site's definitely dated, but I think it's just one of those things where she made it just to show what she did. But it was more about accelerated learning experience. Now, I think she already had most of the knowledge that she needed for her degree. She had already learned it by reading books and doing stuff like that. But, expert knowledge, that's cool. But she was able to take all the CLEP tests she needed for a degree within a matter of a month, which is why it's BA in 4 weeks. And so she took all those different tests, which honestly, congrats to her for the endurance for that, because those tests are not short, and she took a whole bunch of them, enough to get a degree basically in the course of a month. And then we have the MIT Challenge, which was just something that he did. Scott Young, he actually wrote the book on ultra learning, which I recommend. But what he did was he condensed a 4-year degree curriculum from MIT down into 1 year. And so that's just insane on its own. Like, pursuing your own version of a degree that takes a course of 4 years is already going to be hard enough, especially by MIT. But doing it in 12 months is just like ridiculous. But he did it, and he explained it. He has a lot of YouTube videos about it, and I think it's a good thing to learn from. The Degree of Freedom by Jonathan Haber, he pursued his own philosophy education, and that's why I thought it would be important to add as well. And then you have the modular degree. This is what I created, and I need to honestly probably change how this site operates here, but I really like explaining what all of this really goes for, and I'm trying to create a platform for people to use on their own. In fact, right now I'm working on the templates for people to be able to use it and create their own. And so that's one thing I've been working on as well. And so being able to create your own degree, create your own platform and your own pathway to a particular, like if you want a career or you want to go into a degree, that is your choice. That is your prerogative. And so you can take a bootcamp approach where it's more rapid. So you're trying to condense things down to a quick, I need to gain this skill for a job. Or maybe you could take a more degree approach where it takes a few years to go through, maybe even less, since it's accelerated at your own pace. And you can choose once you are learning, you're putting together your own courses, your own degree, and like, you don't have to actually make the course. You can just go on, find a MOOC on edX or Coursera or FutureLearn, whatever platform you want, and put it in there. And one thing I like to do is combine like micro-credentials with books and courses and then podcasts, and just listen to the entire podcast, listen to the entire book, or read the entire book, in addition to taking that course on the same subject. So you get a multiple perspectives, which you don't always get in school too. Sometimes schools in classes and courses, they'll have you read a book and listen to a lecture, and then also maybe have a guest speaker. So you get a few different perspectives. And that's a given if it's a good teacher or a good professor. But most of the time, you're probably going to learn from one or two perspectives, and that's it. Whereas when you make your own degree, you can take a whole wealth of knowledge from multiple different people and take what works for you and make a more educated decision. Finally, that's kind of wrapping things up. I want you to take your education higher. This is actually a two-parter. I'm going to be making another post here soon where it's higher education for polymaths. So taking a next step further, basically. This is kind of like the base level, the self-learners, the people who want to learn, they want to find a pathway. And then the polymaths are either people who are just past this point where they've already spent plenty of time self-learning and they're a jack of all trades, or maybe a T-shaped person, or maybe they're even a polymathic person wanting to expand even farther. Really kind of anywhere on the multidisciplinary spectrum. But that's where the next post is leading. So I hope you enjoyed this OmniContent episode, and leave a comment if you have any questions or like ideas that you can add to this. Cheers.